Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Kevin, we're back. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. The Phillies are undefeated in the postseason. The Eagles are undefeated, and now that the postseason is over here, the Philadelphia Flyers are undefeated as we head into the new campaign.
Yes.
We're here today for your 2023-2024 season preview. Before we dive into it, follow us pretty much everywhere, all your social medias. We're at YWT Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Help us out over there.
Yeah, I like how you tried to kind of parlay all of this with the Flyers went undefeated in preseason this week.
No.
I know, and they start anew with a clean slate. Yes.
The Flyers,
I know, but I'm saying, like,
today,
in addition, let's tie in the fact they won 2 games this week in the preseason. So they were undefeated in the preseason this week, and they're currently undefeated as the season gets started. But
exactly. As the game's
is not, it is not like, but the funny part is this is exactly the way last year started. It's exactly the same. Middle of a Phillies playoff run where excitement is at an all-time high. The Eagles are undefeated. Pretty good stuff. I mean, like, this is the way you want it to be. Before we do start, though, how would you like, this is a special occasion. It's our season preview show. It's a special occasion, right? So how about a surprise?
Okay.
I've got a little something that I'm going to hold up here that belongs on the set, but I didn't want to just have it sitting here for the start of the show. So bear with me. And by the way, I'm sorry for the people who are listening to it. You need to be watching the YouTube channel for this.
Absolutely. Check us out on our YouTube channel.
Bear with me for 1 second.
Yep. Hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Hit the like button on this video. I'll fill some time with some plugs while Kevin's setting it up.
Are you ready?
All right. Ooh, the new sweater.
So we're going to put this... We're going to put this on the backdrop. So again, apologies for the lack of editing here. I'm just going to turn around and put this in the backdrop.
That's fine. But for those listening, it is the new home jersey. Okay, before you turn it around.
Okay.
Do we have a name and number on there?
No, we do not, because
it
is a prop piece.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. I was gonna play the guessing game on who it might have been, but no.
We're not going that far.
Fair.
Now, here's the thing: you can see there's 2 different jerseys behind me now.
Oh, you can see the different colors.
So you can see the color difference.
Absolutely.
For sure. It is this. Here's the thing: I've gotten the chance to. I covered the 3 preseason games at home, obviously, so I've gotten the chance to see these up close, or as close as I can get anyway. 3 times now.
Somebody called Gordon Ramsay. That orange is burnt.
The whole design, the design as a whole is very clean. I mean, I think the only gripe that I really see a lot of anymore is if the numbers on the sleeves had outlines. I mean, really, that's about it. Like, truthfully, I didn't think I was going to like the lack of, like, the piping over the shoulder that much until I saw it in person, and I'm like, this works.
I will admit I was a major critic of this jersey. If you listened to the show over the summer when we got our first looks at them, I came out and said it on the show here. It looks like a beer league jersey, blah, blah, blah. I will say, having seen it, in action here, only on TV, obviously, I haven't gotten the view you've gotten there in the stadium, but it does look far better than I expected it to look, and I knew that it would on the ice, and I do still think that the numbers on the sleeves are a little beer leaguey, a little electrical tape-ish.
The reason being is because they called it a nod to, like, literally 1967, which is the way they originally were on the jerseys. And I get that. I understand you're trying to do the heritage thing. But here's the thing. In 1967, when there was not exactly the most detailed jersey designs on the planet, and oh, by the way, like, the material the jerseys were made out of back then, like, you had people literally stitching everything together, piece by piece almost. So, you wanted somebody who could literally sew on, like, a piece of black fabric onto your sleeve, hey, here's your number in just, one solid color, because that's the best we can do. It's like, it's a little further along now, and I think people like the way that those numbers are. So yeah, I understand that one, but the rest of it looks really good.
I absolutely agree.
What I really like is, and it's kind of hard to see with me in the way, so, and I'm not going to constantly move here.
That's fine.
But the bottom part of the jersey, where it used to be, orange, the white stripe kind of came up,
and the white band,
right, and you can see it a little bit over my shoulder here, like you can see it on this one.
Yeah.
So it used to be that. Now it actually is a solid, like, the black band that's around the bottom of it just blends right into the pants, kind of.
It does, look
and then it
really
goes into the burnt orange. So it's just, it's a
looks
really
a
nice
little more
touch.
solid trunk all the way down. It's gonna look great as a fan jersey if you're wearing, a pair of jeans or something with.
Well, and I'm going to tell you right now, there are a lot of people who are already on that train. I saw a lot of the nude. I mean, there's obviously a lot of...
How many Mitch Cups? How many Mitch Cups?
No, haven't seen that yet.
Really?
You know what it is? I don't know if they're customizing them yet. Right now, I think it is just... Because here's the thing, as we get into this. It was preseason for everybody, and I kind of detailed this a little bit last show because the scoreboard didn't work for half the first period of the first preseason home game. Most of the building is still kind of going through a phase of construction, so to speak. I think that most of it's the event level. So most of it's a part that people don't get to see. It's back of house. It really actually affects me more than it affects everybody else.
Fair enough.
We were doing press conferences in the preseason, road game style.
Right. We talked about this on our last show with the backdrop.
And the locker room's not ready yet. And neither is, I guess, I think there's supposed to be another media room. There's a lot of stuff that's been done, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done in the next, at this point, about a week and a half.
Right. Still finishing
a little less, actually.
Stuff like that, right?
Now, I thought I heard something about the team store also got gutted in this whole thing. So that's also being done. So right now they're kind of selling these things in a pop-up shop, if you will, even just around the concourse or outside or whatever. So pretty much it's blanks and a handful of players. And I've seen several, like Travis Konechny's are out there, and I know that just from the pictures that came out of like, hey, by the way, here's like the pop-up stand. There was Tippett, there was York, there was Farabee, there was Couturier, there was Lawton. So they have, and I don't recall. I'm trying to remember. I think Hart was probably one of them.
I was curious if they had Hart up.
And the thing is I'm not walking around looking for this. Like,
right.
It wasn't the same way at all. But like, it is what it is. So
have you gotten a close up look at the road sweater yet?
Not really. I mean, like, because, and the thing is, like, I'm not typically on the road to begin with, so it's not really going to be a thing for me to see. But
I didn't know if you saw them anywhere floating.
But no, but like, well, and you know what? To my knowledge, they're not for sale yet. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Like, the team store did not make any advertisement or anything of the sort about the road jersey being available.
Okay.
Fanatics did. Now, granted, you're taking a roll of the dice with Fanatics, so
yeah,
tread lightly. But at the same time, that's the only place I've really seen the away sweater being made available to this point. I'm sure there will be other locations I'm sure that the team store will eventually have them. The team store will, like, one of the things I do know is that the team store also seemed to, as far as I can tell, had a lot of, like, the players are, if you've seen some of the clips that the Flyers post on YouTube with the player interviews and things like that, the players are wearing these, like, workout style t-shirts that are kind of camouflage looking, and they have New Era of Orange across them and things like that. Those are, I think, available in the store, things like that. So a lot of stuff is based off of the New Era of Orange, which at this point I think is going to be the hashtag. Like, it's pretty much, absolutely. It hasn't been official, but like, I think you know where it's going by now. So anyway, you get the point. I have not seen I have not seen the away jersey up close. I have seen this one up close. It's pretty nice. Okay. I'm not trying to make it out to be perfect. Like, yes, the numbers on the sleeves leave a little bit to be desired, but the rest of it looks really nice.
Yeah. I will definitely give it a grade up from where I had it over the summer. There's a lot of things.
If you were to go down there now, and I know that you haven't been able to yet, and I know you will want to at some point, so I'm giving you a preview now. And for anybody listening or watching right now who wants a preview of kind of, listen, if you're thinking about checking the team out this year, because that's really all it is. It's not it's not going to be the home ice advantage that it typically is. Let's be real. Sure. But there are a lot of nods to things that should be familiar to people, especially if you're the long timers, if you're the diehards of this. The jersey color is one, obviously. They went back to kind of the roots of that. And they even showed the video at the beginning of the whole thing where the jersey that's labeled, I think, 1981 to 2004 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they show it busting out of the trophy case, kind of like out of the display case. It's back. The center ice logo, it feels like home again. Like, it just does. You see that double logo at center ice. It feels like home. It just straight up does. Even down to one of the pet peeves that a lot of, big traditional Flyers fans have is the "Let's Go Flyers" chant. Because if you start, like, you hear people who do it, and it's the cadence of it. There's a cadence to it that is kind of pronounced. It's their own, things like that. Well, they've kind of done away with, one of the things I've noticed so far, they've really kind of done away with the processed, packaged music to an extent for certain things. Like, yes, you're playing songs in between breaks in play. I'm not saying you're not. But Lauren Hart came out to do the national anthem all 3 times for this game, and it was not some pre-recorded thing that like backing track that she was singing to. The organist was there playing the organ.
Live organ?
Yes.
Love
and
that.
so is whenever someone scores against them and they try to get everybody to say, let's go Flyers, right? It's done the traditional way. It is not some other thing that they're trying to like pump in. You've got a guy playing in the cadence that everybody wants it to be.
I have a feeling that's your president of hockey ops who spent the last 20 years on the television side of things.
Oh, it's definitely a Jonesy effect, but there's I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't also call it a bit of a Dan Hilferty effect.
That is fair. You know what?
Like somebody up at the top's got to be listening to it.
I consistently forget that Dan Hilferty isn't just an executive who we like and who is doing good things. That I continuously forget that he is a bleed orange Flyers fan.
Well, and he's learning a lot on the fly, and we understand this and know this. I get that. But something that I think is really important is, and you may remember this and you may not, so I'm not worried if you don't. But actually, no, because it goes hand in hand at this point.
Okay.
What is Dan Hilferty's title equivalent to what Dave Scott's title was when he had it?
Dan Hilferty's the CEO, right?
Well, that's part of it. He is chairman and CEO of Comcast Spectacor, which is therefore the ownership of the team. Right. But he has a specific title that is related to the Flyers. Gave. It's governor of the Flyers, which is what Dave Scott's title was, and it's what Dan Hilferty's title is. There's there's a footnote next to Keith Jones's name too, because yes, he is president of hockey operations, but he is also an alternate governor. Which tells you how big his say is in even those types of operations, that he is pretty much right there. Like, he's right there with Danny Briere in terms of the hockey ops side, but he's also right there with Dan Hilferty in terms of how do we run this thing.
Is Keith Jones the single most important man in the Philadelphia Flyers organization?
I mean, he is. I don't want to say
he's really high on the list.
I don't want. Well, no, I'm not going to say really high on the list. I don't want to say single because I think there's a list of most important people to this process, but he's the top of the list.
I think he is the keystone. Like, if we're going to use the Pennsylvania analogy here, he is the keystone.
If he's number one, I mean, Hilferty's not even number 2 on the list at that point because Hilferty's kind of along for the ride.
No, I agree.
Playing along.
I think Briere is 2.
Yeah, Briere is 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then probably John Tortorella is 3.
Right. Like the way the organization is, you're looking at the on-ice product as the first.
Because at the end of the day, too, Dan Hilferty is not part of like I believe I saw they had they have their typical preseason NHL Board of Governors meeting. Dan Hilferty's not on that. And I don't believe Dave Scott was either. Like, not the same, like, obviously not like Ed Snider was. Ed Snider was pretty much the lead dog of that whole thing for a while. But... Yeah,
there's the NHL Board of Governors, and then there is the club, the 6 or 7 owners that are kind of the actual...
Well, because now the head of that group, it's Jacobs. It's the Bruins owner.
Yep.
Who's Jeremy leading Jacobs. That charge now. And I mean, he was probably second in line anyway. That's fair to say.
And the Wirtzes were up there for a while. The Chicago.
Yeah, that's true.
Group.
That's true.
Not so much recently, especially with Rocky passing away.
Well, exactly, and
obviously a
whole
anyway.
Other stuff. Yeah, I know.
There was a whole nuke dropped into that organization, but anyway.
Yeah. But either way. So that's really like it does. There's a lot of elements that feel really good when you go in there. There's a lot, and
it seems like they're doing things the right way. So a lot of the complaints about where things had been heading for the last 10 years or so, basically since Ed Snider had passed away, was that things were heading in the direction of a sanitized corporate ownership, bad situation. And that is essentially where the Flyers have been for a decade and a half at this point. And with Dan Hilferty kind of in charge, it feels a little closer to what it was, where there's someone who heart and soul loves the Philadelphia Flyers.
Family atmosphere too. You want it to feel family run. I mean, let's put it this way. One of the biggest things, and this is a little piece of news too, because this came out this week, one of the big events they're having, we kind of touched on this a little bit. They're having a Flyers Hall of Fame induction this year. And Mark Recchi's going in. It's going to be January 27th prior to a game against the Boston Bruins. Now, why is this significant? Well, first of all, in the case of specifically Recchi, he played for both teams. He won a Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins. There's a tie there. So it makes perfect sense.
Although, to be fair, Mark Recchi played for about a dozen other teams, too.
Yeah, but he won there, and it's one of three. And it is where he retired, ultimately. He literally stood on the ice after that Game 7 and said, I'm done.
Yep.
This is a great way to go out. And he was right, obviously. And now he's a Hall of Famer league-wide. Look, it's kind of shocking it's taken this long for him to get into the Flyers Hall of Fame because he was a Hockey Hall of Famer first, A, and B, he played the most years of his career with the Flyers, ultimately. Yep. He was here twice.
Love Mark Recchi.
So, okay, that's already a big enough deal because we know how these ceremonies typically go. They're done, even during the corporate portion of this, they were done the right way. Because let's put it this way, you got to qualify the corporate portion pretty close to it anyway. I don't think it was exact. It was right before, I guess.
Okay.
Because when they brought Lindros and Leclaire back together, and it was it was not even a big deal, as big of a deal for Leclaire in terms of coming back, because there was really no bad blood there. There was no bad blood there. It was Lindros. There was bad blood there, was the big and he came back and they buried the hatchet, and it was great. And he's still a huge part of it because, by the way, here's the other half of the event. The other significance to it being a Flyers-Bruins game on a Saturday afternoon where you're putting a player into your team's Hall of Fame is that the night before, you get to have an alumni game between the Flyers and Bruins in the 50th anniversary year of the 1974 team, which you will honor that night. And who did that? And obviously,
who did they beat in the Stanley Cup final?
Right.
Yep.
Now, what does Eric Lindros have to do with that? Well, he's already confirmed to be playing in the alumni game. He's already confirmed with Recchi and with Brett Fedek.
Okay.
The Crazy Eights line, for those who don't know. They're all playing. I only can assume that at least two other members of the front office now, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, no. Well, maybe three, actually, because I'd love to see that Danny Briere wants to still suit him up, actually.
Oh, he better get out there. Come on, Danny.
Because Jonesy does not play in these games. Jonesy usually stands on a bench and does an interview and things like that. But he's never played in one. Even the
Get in there, Jonesy.
Even the 50th anniversary year, he did not play.
You're not a broadcaster anymore. Get in there.
Well, I wonder if he would for that reason. Like, seriously, because here's the other thing. He didn't. I'm thinking about it now. He didn't play in the 50th anniversary year because the team was on the road that day.
Right.
So when they had their big alumni game event, he wasn't even in Philly to be able to do it. So I wonder, but you got to figure Danny Briere's played in them, so I can only assume he would think about suiting up. But you've also got, by the way, in the box next to him, John Leclaire and Patrick Sharp.
Yep.
So I wonder if they would suit up too.
And by the way, if you're getting John Leclaire back and you're not calling Michael Renberg and Eric Lindros,
well, the problem is that they're already reuniting one of Lindros's lines. So
that's fine. He can double shift. Eric's in great shape. Eric is in great shape. He can double shift.
I'm going to try to pull up the release really quickly because I want to make sure I get everybody right that is confirmed so far. Because, by the way, on the Boston side of things, if you're a hockey fan in general, by the way, this is already a really cool. I
assume there's huge names coming from Boston.
Well, we only know, I think, of one so far, so I'm not going to jump the gun like crazy. But Ray Bourque is supposedly playing.
Oh,
yes,
we love that.
So this is already this could be some fun stuff. So here we go. Here's the release, just so I can read all of this out for you, because it is. Obviously, the weekend's activities are centering around and by the way, they're celebrating both Cup teams at once, it sounds like, because it says for both. And also a lead into the Hall of Fame game and with the induction of Recchi, all that stuff. In honor of that, the anniversary of the original Flyers-Bruins matchup, all that. So it's Friday, January 26th at 7:00. I mentioned the reuniting of the Crazy Eights line. Okay, there you go. Okay, so here you go. John Leclaire and Patrick Sharp are suiting up, confirmed already, by the way.
Okay.
So is new Flyers TV broadcaster Brian Boucher.
Okay.
And so is, to throw it back to 1974 for you, so is Joe Watson.
Love that.
He is going to play.
So who's Paul Coffey playing for?
That's funny.
He played for both teams towards the end of his career. Paul, come on.
But anyway, all it says is there's going to be Bruins greats, including 2004 Hockey Hall of Fame inductee Ray Bourque.
Ooh,
which is real. Just already is really awesome stuff. So like,
I wonder if enough time has passed then that you can get Bergeron out.
That's what I was wondering too a little bit. I thought about that too. Because
if
Bergeron play,
and if Bergeron's there, Chara will be there too.
That'd be fun. I mean, Chara was there, Bergeron's there.
He'd go if Patrice was there, guaranteed.
That'd be pretty funny. By the way, obviously, it does bring back some of the other names that everybody's familiar with from those teams: Clark, Barber, Perrant, all those guys. They are, from what I understand, they are not playing, but there's a opportunity to get VIP tickets for like this party thing, and they will be there to mingle with fans. But remember, this is what we talked about, though. This is what you want them to do.
Absolutely.
This is come on out and mingle with the champions of the 70s here, and
just don't call us scout.
Well,
we want you here at these events. We don't want you in draft meetings. That's fine.
Well, in fairness, I know it's not regular season and anything, but it seems like it's been kind of. I think we talked about this last week too. That box is filled with a lot of new faces now. I mean, you've got like the obvious. I mean, Jonesy and Briere are sitting right there, and then you got Brent Flair, and you've got and Leclerc's there, and Sharp's there, and they're doing their jobs too, and things like that. I mean, it's really interesting, and I also wonder, by the way, because the team obviously doesn't have a game until the 27th, so there's also another name, and we brought him up a week ago as well because he's the new radio voice. Would Todd Fedoruk suit up for the Flyers?
Probably, yeah.
I don't see why not.
Right.
And Fridge seems like Fridge has played in these, by the way, before.
Absolutely, he's been around,
and he loves these games, and I'll tell you why he loves these games, because this is where he gets to score.
Absolutely,
nobody fights in these games, so he goes out and scores a goal and is doing crazy celebrations. He has the ball with these.
Absolutely, but
anyway,
all right,
so let's
get the season rolling, or the season preview rolling here, and we'll start by finishing up on the preseason.
Yeah, so let's go backwards for a second, because obviously the last handful of preseason games are kind of supposed to decide some of your roster battles here.
Right. And I did want to mention, by the way, your graphic here on the YouTube channel does say that the Flyers do win their last 2 preseason games. And those last couple preseason games are also when you're getting pretty close to what you expect your early roster to look like.
Correct. Now,
obviously you expect things to change, and you, like you said, you may still be giving some guys minutes that you're, looking to get an eye on in terms of battles.
Well, so let me read off the 2 scores really quick, because they beat the Bruins on Monday 3-1, and then they beat the Islanders on Thursday 5-2.
Yeah.
And those sound like great wins and all that type of stuff like that. So I want to preface this whole thing by telling everybody that don't get too excited, because the Boston Bruins and New York Islanders did not exactly ice their starting NHL lineup.
That's fair.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that the best player that the Bruins sent that night was Jake DeBrusk, and I'm pretty sure that the Islanders' best player they sent was J.G. Peugeot.
That is fair.
It wasn't a loaded lineup. Like, you were not getting the New York Islanders with Barzal and Horvat and Anders Lee and and Brock Nelson. Like, you were not getting. I mean, you got their defensive core for the most part. I mean, Dobson played and Mayfield played, and a couple others did. I know Romanov played, and he's like their lower pairing kind of guy, but he's NHL lineup material.
Sure.
The New York Islanders also have a Sebastian Aho who is NHL level material, and he played as well.
Right.
So like that's 4 out of 6 defensemen that were legit.
But then it was Varlamov instead of Sorokin. So.
Well, but Varlamov even playing the whole game. Same thing with the Bruins. The Bruins played Jeremy Swayman the whole game on Monday, right. which is at least mildly substantial. At least it's not.
That's fair. That's a real NHL goalie, right?
It's
a real NHL goalie, and the fact that
in fairness, nobody knows what the Bruins are going to do with that, with like who's in net for most of the season. Like, it's
Swayman
probably going to be a
starter.
straight up. Well, it's probably going to be what it was a year ago, a straight up tandem.
Right.
I mean, you got 2 guys who play really well,
Right.
So it is what it is.
But it is still encouraging that you put 5 goals by Semyon Varlamov.
Sure.
For a team that struggled to score goals last year, and Semyon Varlamov is a real NHL goalie. He's not a starter at this point.
The other encouraging part, if you go back to the win against Boston the weekend prior, which we talked about, is who's scoring goals.
Yes.
Because the first goal of that weekend game in Boston on the road was Joel Farabee off a turnover.
Yep.
And then Joel Farabee had another goal.
He created a turnover.
Well, I hear you. But then Joel Farabee had another goal on a deflection against the Bruins at home.
Yep.
And that's nice to see. Travis Konechny scored in that game. Cam Atkinson scored. Cam Atkinson, by the way, who hasn't scored a goal in over a year in any form of competitive game, gets on the board. Oh, by the way, who are picking up the assists on these goals? Atkinson's was assisted by Tippett and Frost. Frost had an assist on Konechny's goal too. Farabee's was a deflection on a Ronnie Adder shot. Now we'll get to him in a little bit.
Yep.
And Sean Couturier had an assist, which was Couturier's first point of the preseason
in 1,000
as well.
days, it feels like.
Sure. No, so then you jump to the Saturday or to the Thursday game against the Islanders, the last one, and okay, this one's a little interesting because the first goal of the game was scored, or first Flyers goal of the game was scored by Nick Delorier. Now that doesn't happen that frequently, but fourth line working things well, and we're going to get to the fourth line when we talk about the roster as a whole because that's a very big part of this picture. But then you get a Noah Cates, Travis Konechny rush that Cates creates by himself, by the way, because he blocks the shot, comes out of the zone, sees that he can't get it. Konechny's going to get there first and just goes straight to the net and deflects it in.
Noah Cates, by the way, by and large, has basically picked up where he left off last season. He has looked great.
He is going to be a massive player to watch this year in terms of.
I'm considering picking him up in fantasy.
Well, I wouldn't blame you for it, to be honest. And he's the type of guy right now that you want to look at now, and we talked about this kind of when he signed. Where's the offense go? Because he's played 3 games in a preseason, maybe 4, and defensively looks fine in all of them. Now, I understand, again, this is, he didn't play Boston with Patrice Bergeron anymore like he would have been doing last year, and he didn't play the Islanders with Horvat in the middle or something like that. You know what I mean? But still, he's playing well defensively. He seems like to the point where they're like Tortorella even said they're not even coaching him anymore on defense in terms of where he needs to go and whatever. He just does what he has to do. And they want him to push it offensively though, and that was a great start. Yep,
and the great news is with Sean Couturier looking like he's pretty ready to go here, pretty 100% heading into the season. Noah Cates doesn't have to get those tough matchups anymore. If they were playing, if Patrice Bergeron hadn't retired, he wouldn't have to go against Noah Cates. He would be going against Sean Couturier. And things are just going to be easier for Noah Cates just by the virtue of having Sean Couturier above him on the depth chart. I expect great things out of him. Or you know what I mean. Or sharing minutes, sharing matchups. It's going to help a lot.
Sure. And so we get to, so then you get beyond the first 2 goals that we just talked about, and Tippett scores his first of the preseason. Nice breakaway. Really good passing play, by the way, because it went up the ice from really quick, by the way. Like it was a bunch of short passes, Sanheim to Forrester to Frost, and then Frost had the lead pass through the Islanders defense to get to Tippett, and Tippett didn't score on the initial shot, stayed with it, got his own rebound, scored a goal there. Konechny scored on a 5-on-3, which, by the way, for about 30 seconds, looked like they didn't know what they were doing, and then all of a sudden the space opened, because they were just perimeter passing the whole time. Space opened up in the middle, and all of a sudden you got Sean Couturier, who's giving you that pass from the corner to the slot, and Konechny just ripped it right, all in one motion right into the net. And it's like, okay, that's what it is. And then Atkinson scored again in the third period of that game, his second goal of the preseason. Yep. And Morgan Frost.
I like seeing him find the net twice this week. It's a good sign heading into the regular season.
Let's put it this way. The end of the preseason for Morgan Frost, by the way, who had 2 assists in each of the last 2 games. Again, I know it's not the full lineups, but still, for a team that lacks playmakers, according to John Tortorella.
Well, for a team that struggled to score last year, like I was saying earlier.
But for a team that lacks playmakers, that's a potential playmaker if he's not scoring any goals right now, but 4 assists. Hello,
I can already tell you that this Flyers team is going to frustrate me this season by winning several games that they shouldn't win. And I can already tell you. I'm not saying anything crazy, of course, because they are still going to be a bad team. Don't get it wrong. But they're going to win more games than they should. They're gonna have nights where they pop off for 4, 5, 6 goals, and it's going to be fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. And as we head through a couple of dark years here, it will be nice to have these fun moments.
The thing that you have to take with you for right now is really paying attention to who's scoring goals and what's, where this goes. Because you don't want to see, look, even if it makes it a little bit better, you don't necessarily care that much if Nick Delorier scores a goal or not, because it doesn't equate to long-term future. You kind of want to see Cam Atkinson scoring some goals because you need him to show that he's back to a level that makes him marketable again in terms of, to the league, not to your own team. Right now, you can't do any, if you wanted him traded in the offseason, for example, because you're oh, you're rebuilding. What can he do? Well, no one's taking a guy who just missed an entire year. He's got to prove he can play. So you want him to do well so that somebody sits there and goes, oh, hey, you got a guy who previously had scored 40 goals in this league, who maybe has a really successful season bouncing back from a year-long injury, and then goes, oh, by the way, his contract's one more year and under $6 million. I'll take it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you back a prospect or a second round pick or something. You know what I mean? Like, again, asset management.
There is value to be had there. Yep.
But
absolutely.
That's not going to happen overnight. Like, you got to play out the season, and Cam Atkinson has to play. Whether you think that means he's blocking somebody or not, he has to play.
Right. Well, and another group of people that you could make that argument for in terms of blocking is what we assume is going to be the fourth line. Nick Delorier.
Kind of.
Let's go into them because I think that's
so let's just start analyzing the roster. Yeah, we're into this.
Absolutely. I think the fourth line, or what appears to be the fourth line, is going to be a fun little group to talk about. So, as it currently sits, it's Hathaway, Delorier, and I just blanked out Poehling.
Yes.
Hathaway, Delorier, and Poehling, and that looks like it's probably going to be your fourth line. Poehling brings a little speed. Hathaway is kind of your middleman, and then obviously Nick Delorier is your big lumbering goon, and I say that with respect.
Yeah, you're also by the way, you're saying that by size, not like.
Of course, right?
Because by natural position, Poehling's the center, and the other two guys are wingers. But Poehling, yes, is kind of your smaller guy.
I just mean in terms of builds, right? Poehling's your speedy little center.
But Poehling's got some size. I mean, he's not the small, he's not the smallest guy out of the team. Obviously,
this is going to be a mean line to play against, and Poehling holds his own for sure. But Hathaway is nasty, and Delorier murders people.
It's why to this point it's the only line that Tortorella has pretty much confirmed.
That's a line. Yep.
And it's why that's the only certainty that we really have to go on is that these three are together and it's not being broken up before the season opener. That's got the potential to piss some people off, by the way.
I was about to say, to your point about the fans, if you think they're blocking people, yeah, you're right. They are. Because you didn't have to sign... Right, you didn't have to sign Hathaway. You didn't have to sign Poehling. Like, those are guys that are taking roster spots that you didn't have to.
No, now hold on a second, though, because I do want to kind of interject with one here, because I think that Poehling's going to be a fascinating player to watch this year. And the reason being is because... Just a friendly reminder to people who want the team to play younger, play kids, that kind of thing. Ryan Poehling was drafted 2 spots higher than Morgan Frost was. So if you are playing the season out and going, well, let's see what Morgan Frost does as the follow-up act to the second half of the season, and you want to give the guy a chance, right? And because look this way,
Ryan Poehling is 24 years old,
right? So my point is, if you were on the train of, well, you don't trade Morgan Frost because that's giving up on a guy at 24. Then you're okay with the Poehling signing and a guy taking a chance on himself for 1 year at under $1.5 million. He's 1.4.
Right.
So he's cheap and he's taking a chance on himself and he's 24 and he's literally just willing to slot into your fourth line center role and not really
to get some ice time,
actually at that point he's not blocking the kids because he's practically a kid himself.
Exactly.
And I don't want to take away from the fact that yes. A guy who has been around in the picture for an organization since 2017 is not necessarily a kid anymore. In that sense, it's been 6 years since your draft year. You're not necessarily a kid anymore. But I just want to say that because he's being under 26, 27 though, still puts you on the potential to be on the right side of a rebuild.
Absolutely. That's all. And if you told me that the Flyers signed an undrafted player to the Ryan Poehling contract and we were having the same discussion, it might be a little different. Ryan Poehling was drafted in the first round.
Right.
He's a good hockey player. I know he has failed to live up to expectations a little bit, but he has had a bit of he's had some tough paths in front of him. But as we sit here, again, he's 24 years old. How often do we hear about college players who don't come out till they're 22 and then spend 2 years in the AHL and don't make the NHL till they're 24 anyway? If Ryan Poehling is all that, plus he's got NHL experience.
Sure, and that's the thing. You don't typically expect guys who are going to play. And listen, they got bigger minutes in the preseason because sometimes your typical fourth line was your second line on some nights,
right?
Like in the road games, for example. But he had a lot of shifts where he's very noticeable. And sometimes that's in his speed. Sometimes that's in he's got the ability to set some guys up.
Sure. And
it's just all together. And by the way, penalty killing too. He's a good penalty killer.
And on that line, on that fourth line, he should be the one carrying the puck. I don't want Nick Delorier skating up the ice with the puck. Granted, Hathaway is fine, but I prefer the puck in the hands of Ryan Poehling.
What he typically is supposed to do is he's supposed to be the mover, and then if you're going to play the dump and chase game, then Hathaway and Delorier are your guys who kind of get in on the forecheck with the bigger bodies.
Right.
Because Hathaway just goes, I mean, let's put it this way. If you saw the goal that Delorier scored, Hathaway was bumping into everybody to try to get positioning anyway, or to get the puck and get puck control. So he basically went rough and tumble to get a primary assist on that.
Right.
Like, that's how it's got to be sometimes. And, that's the fourth line for right now. And that may change in 5 games. It's distinctly possible, but for right now, because every single preseason game they had, and they made a lot of stuff happen within those games, they're going to get a chance to play together because right now their styles fit together.
Yeah, and they've earned it. They've looked good. They've worked hard. They've done the right things. Like John Tortorella said, that's a line.
Sure, it is.
That is the only line we really know for sure. I think
right now you can deduct the rest. I mean, right now there's 13 forwards on the roster. So
I was going to say,
we want to do this.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good idea of what the top 6 is in some configuration. The names there probably include Couturier, Atkinson.
I'm going to go through and find what the actual combinations were at Saturday's practice, because that's the last time the team practiced. They had an off day Sunday. So I'm going to go and find the exact line combinations for you.
Okay.
And I'm just going through, trying to find among the beats, just trying to see what was going on.
And we have the names you're thinking of up in the top 6, right? We have Couturier, Atkinson, Konechny, Farabee.
Pretty close. I mean, here's pretty much the way it is. So I'll read off the 3 lines to you that kind of go along with this. So I'll start by reading the 2 lines that are completely solid, and then I'll read the line that has the flexibility portion of it to it.
Right.
Well, it was the one that was rotating. I'll call it that.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest way to do it. So you had Lawton, Cates, Konechny on a line.
Yep.
You had Tippett, Frost, Atkinson on a line.
Okay.
And then you had Couturier, Brink, and Farabee and Forster were rotating.
Okay.
That was the lines combinations for the forwards to start with. Obviously, the big question here involves 2 names that I mentioned in the last grouping of 4, if you will, and it's not Farabee and Couturier, obviously.
Right.
Because you've heard those names before.
Right. It seems as though the battle for that last forward spot has kind of come down at this point in time, obviously. And we say that recording on Sunday night. It sounds like they're going to make their decision Monday, so we're just going to be wrong at this point. We're going to be outdated. You'll know more than we do.
Well,
by the time
here's the best way to look at it. They don't have to cut a forward if they don't want to right now. Right. They don't have to. You're at 13, and that's a perfectly legitimate number, especially going on the road, a perfectly legitimate number to start the season with.
That's fair.
The question is, and Tortorella kind of addressed this, is how do they use Forster and Brink? Because there's a reason to sit there and say they both should play, which is naturally the answer you want to hear in a rebuild.
And that looks like the battle.
But you also have to kind of battle with the fact that Tortorella likes to put together a competitive team, regardless of whether you're rebuilding or not. He wants a competitive team. And if he gets a line together like that 4th line, then he's going to play them. So what basically you're asking, something's got to give, right? Now, I don't know if that's somebody else. The problem you have there is you've got 2 guys in Couturier and Atkinson that you can't afford to pull because you just want them playing again because you've waited for too long and you got to get them moving. You're not pulling a Tippett or a Konechny or a Cates because let's just call the shots like it is. He loves those guys.
Right. If you're looking for a competitive roster, that's what you're looking for.
Right. And I'll double down on this one even too, because he's not going to pull Frost from the lineup, because even though he challenges Frost immensely here, he always seems to want him to go a step further before he gets the praise kind of. He's a center, and you're talking about 2 wingers here. So really the position that's got to give is a winger. Yeah. Now, out of all of
he's
that,
not pulling Scott Lawton.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, out of that, the only 2 names I didn't mention that I just went through the whole group was Farabee and Lawton. Yep. None of them are coming out either. So somebody's going to have to sit, and it's probably going to be a kid. And he talked about sitting, kind of rotating them in for a little bit. And this is the important thing to remember, because I know that on the opening night, if Brink does not play or Forrester does not play, people are going to go insane. And I understand the reasoning behind it, because yes, after all of this time and after all of the frustration of not saying rebuild, you're now in a committed rebuild, and you want to see the action that follows the word, which is playing younger. Yes, at that point, your forward group consists of, take Farabee, Frost, and Cates kind of out of the picture from this, because they still fall into the category of young and not a ton of experience.
They're not prospects at this point. Right.
They're not prospects, but they're not old, right? Like they're young enough.
Right.
And Tippett qualifies too, because Tippett's not really a prospect anymore. So, okay, keep Tippett in that category too. But then you're going to sit there and go, but you're playing Couturier, Atkinson, Konechny, and Lawton in addition to the fourth line, which, again, of which you have two guys who fall into the category with the Couturiers and the Atkinsons, and one guy who falls into the category with Frost, Farabee, and Tippett.
Right.
And Cates, you know, like.
And at a certain point, there's only so many roster spots, and the math ain't math.
Well, sure. And the thing is, too, like, okay, so far, I think they've pushed a lot of the right buttons to this point in terms of they sent down the forwards that did not do enough in the preseason. Simple as that. And I'm going to get to I'm going to get to him in a second because, yes, I know that's really the big one because he was the last forward that really went. But, like, here's an example. And this doesn't involve – this is one that doesn't involve waivers, by the way. Like, coming into training camp, there was a lot of talk about Elliot Desnoyers got a brief NHL stint last year. Talk was he was going to be a big player in camp. So was Ola Lixel. Like, are they going to be emerging as guys who make the roster? And they were cut before the last preseason game.
Yeah, they were cut pretty early.
And here's the thing. It was completely justified because in the games that they did play, they didn't do enough to stand out. They were kind of invisible. Like, the reason why Brink is still here is because he had games where he was noticeable. Even the Islander game where he didn't put up any points, unlike what he did against Boston twice, he played to a level where he's creating and he was doing things that made himself noticeable. And you felt like you had no choice. Forster didn't even have a point in the preseason.
Right.
Well, no, I shouldn't say point because he did. He had an assist on the one typical I just mentioned, but he didn't have a goal. And you're like, so that, you know, isn't that kind of a prerequisite for making a team out of the preseason? It kind of is, but in John Tortorella's eyes, it's stop talking about points.
Right.
Did he do some stuff to help us and create and make, you know, his play away from the puck and all that stuff? So those are the conversations that come into play with that. And obviously, you know, Forster kind of did exactly what I said he was going to need to do to make the team, which is basically don't fall flat on your face, kid, and you should be there. But it's also really hard. Like seriously, if let's just say hypothetically that they with this last, because the roster, by the way, I guess we should also say the roster's at 24 technically at the moment. So one more player has to go down or get cut or something, right? If they were to just do that to Brink, it would be a case where Bobby Brink did everything he could possibly do to make the roster out of the preseason and training camp and still not get the reward at the end because there was just so many so many players, not enough spots. Right. Simple as that. And it's really, you know, it's kind of,
it would be unfortunate
kind of sucks to say that, you know, for somebody like him because he's worked really hard. He didn't get to play like his usual season last year. He battled through injury to come back and then had half of a year and never was able to kind of come back. Like, remember, he got a sampling of the NHL when he signed. And then he had to go through an injury recovery and didn't crack the NHL lineup at all the next year because you're in the middle of all of that, right? So,
and the good news is if Forster or Brink is the one who gets cut here, and you know if it ends up being Brink, the good news is the Flyers are in a situation, and you and I briefly mentioned this before the show, was that the Flyers are in a situation where every injury, every trade, right? Because this is a team that expects to lose some assets, right? We talked about Ryan Poehling. There's other names that we've bandied about as potential trade targets here. Every time a roster spot becomes available, someone fun and exciting is going to come up to fill it.
Almost for sure. Yeah.
Right. It's no longer the Flyers of 6 or 7 years ago where you're like, oh God, are we calling up Andrew McDonald or right now we're talking about fun, exciting names.
The roller coaster ride that was known as Justin Bailey's trip on the PA Turnpike.
God, I enjoyed Justin Bailey while he was here, but they did him so dirty on that.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's because that's not even frequent flyer miles. That's tolls up the turnpike.
Yeah, and the worst part is they weren't just paper transactions, like where they told him, "Hey, sit tight, you'll be back tomorrow." Like he went anyway,
and would play for the weekend and then come back. It's pretty sad, I know.
Unfortunate. He was playing a lot of hockey.
But you're right, and here's the thing: because not only are you right about that, but you're right about the fact that let's think if it is Brink, if it's Desnoyers, if it's Lixel, then they all just kind of come and go as they are needed because there's no waivers involved with that.
Right.
But there are other guys who need to go through waivers, and obviously I think the headliner of that group is the one that was on waivers this weekend.
Right.
So that would be, I believe that was Friday. So it was after the preseason finale.
And that would be everyone's top 5. He's in the top 3 favorite gingers on the team. It's a tough list, but Wade Allison definitely makes the cut.
Top 3 out of how many? I mean, they're not as ginger heavy as they used to be.
Sean Couturier.
All right, Couturier's 1.
Owen Tippett.
Owen Tippett's 2.
Cam York's a little gingy.
No. He's very much so.
Okay. So there's multiple.
But I think that's the only.
And Wade Allison.
Well, yeah, but I think that's the only other 3.
Okay, and Wade Allison makes the top 3.
Okay,
out of the 4.
Sure.
All right then.
But Wade Allison was on waivers, which is a big deal because obviously it means he didn't make it. It just means he didn't make it. And to be fair, I know Tortorella kind of I don't know if you saw the press conference from Saturday where Tortorella was kind of very short with. First of all, obviously it's a complete waste of time to ask him what kind of conversation was had because he's not telling you what he said to any player. No. But when he was asked about kind of the reason why Wade Allison was put on waivers, he gave a very short but very succinct answer, which was players played better, kids.
Yep.
Fair enough. I'm pretty sure that basically what that qualifies as is translate it better. You can translate it even further than just kids played better. Just translate it to Forster and Brink were better than Allison in the preseason.
Yep.
And that's why he's not there.
Absolutely. And the good news is we're seeing these cuts made for the right decisions, right? It certainly seems at this point as though there isn't some owner telling you who's got to be here, there, blah, blah, blah. It seems like the hockey decisions are being made for hockey reasons. And there is one other battle that we should probably talk about, and we've talked about it before, but it is the goaltending.
Well, we do want to get to them. We want to get to defense too, because that's not clear either. Obviously, the goaltending one is kind of interesting only because of the fact that it's not a battle realistically, because it was actually one of the few decisions that was actually made known pretty early in this process. Like I'm talking like almost right after we had our last show, it was made official. I mean, I think it was made official going into the Monday game against Boston.
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken, because Tortorella flat out said it. Sam Harrison's got the backup job. He flat out said it. And while certainly I understand based on performance, based on merit, I understand that decision. It does leave you with a bit of a situation because now you have
to carry 3 goalies or waive Felix Sandstrom and take a risk.
Right. And well, here's the thing. For the opening night roster, strictly the opening night one, or not opening night, but for the submission of the finalized opening night rosters,
right.
Which by the way, like it happens on the Monday, like it's happening on Monday that you finalize your opening night roster, and I'm making air quotes to say that because of the fact that for the teams that play on Tuesday, that's probably very much your roster going into the first game. For the teams that play on Thursday, like the Flyers do,
you still have 3 whole league days to make moves.
So here's the kind of like thing with this. Because Felix Sandstrom was not placed on waivers today, Sunday, as we're like the hours before we're recording this, because he was not placed on waivers, he will not be on, like he doesn't get the chance to clear and go to the minors or anything like that. So he is not going to be the final cut.
Right.
Leading into Monday. He will not be the final cut.
It will be somebody who can get sent down without having to go through waivers.
Exactly. So we already mentioned 2 forward candidates. And then from there, by the way, so because I don't want to mention all the candidates of that without being able to go right into it. So let's kind of put the bow on the goaltending and then go into that, which is from there, from Monday when the roster is actually submitted, then you have to make the decision in the coming days about whether you do eventually decide to waive him or do you decide to just carry 3 for a period of time. I understand why the Flyers are being careful about this, because you're in a situation where very specifically one team in particular, but teams in general, look for cheap goaltending that hits the waiver wire.
Yep.
And certainly today, the last day before the rosters get submitted, and this is the last waiver day possible, this is usually the time when teams make that final cut and say, well, listen, I guess this is where we are with our goaltending situation, because these 2 guys make it. This 3rd guy, I'd love to stash in minors, but I don't know if he's going to clear. We have to try it because we don't have room for him on the roster. He would just be sitting around taking up space, like whatever. That is what Felix Sandstrom's kind of situation is now. So I've got to imagine at some point soon, there is going to be a waiver. Well, they're going to probably, sure, because after you get into a certain point, then it's about cap compliance, and it's also about team need too, because teams that don't necessarily need it won't do it. Right now, you got a team that's sitting there, a very prominent team who's had playoff success in the past, and a prominent goaltender for that team in Andre Vasilevsky.
Right, maybe the best goalie in the world over the last 5 or 10 years.
Like, truth be told, you don't find many goalies that are like Vasilevsky anymore in the league. It's very, it's more of a tandem type of position, and because of that, you have to be careful if you're going to put a guy on waivers who like Sandstrom makes less than $1 million for a team that needs a goalie. They're going to come after him.
I wonder if you put him on waivers tomorrow, because the Lightning will theoretically have their roster finalized, and they play Tuesday night. So if you put Sandstrom on waivers Monday, it'll be tough for them to claim him Tuesday. They play Tuesday night. Their roster's not. It puts them in a really sticky situation. I wonder if tomorrow is the day that they try to slip, and by tomorrow I mean Monday at time of recording here, is the time that they try to slip Felix Sandstrom through waivers. Again, obviously that's something the audience will know before we do.
I'm thinking is maybe not Monday, but Tuesday. And the reason being is because you're going to have to make that decision before knowing the situation with the Lightning completely, or any other team for that matter. Like, here's a prime example for you. In the Sunday waiver wire, Martin Jones is on waivers from Toronto. That is significant because now he becomes available as one of those options for Tampa Bay.
Yep.
Or any other team for that matter. If somebody bites, especially Tampa, well, then now they've filled their roster. But you won't know that until 2 p.m.
Until 2 o'clock, right?
Right, on Monday, which is also when you would have to submit. So you could basically get another day, see who tried to do that one-day approach potentially, and you could still do this on Tuesday and have it cleared by Wednesday. Call up your other, they sent Bobby Brink. They sent Bobby Brink down to the minors on paper for a day and a half and called him back up as soon as they figured out what was happening with Sandstrom. Done deal.
I think that might be the plan.
Right. Now, by the way, Forster and Brink are two options for that. I feel like we should get to the third option, which is on defense, because here's the thing. If they were just dressing 7 or icing 7 defensemen or having 7 defensemen on the roster, you have your 7 pretty easily.
Yep.
Travis Sanheim, Rasmus Ristolainen, Cam York, Nick Seeler, Mark Stahl, Sean Walker, Igor Zamula. And Zamula really kind of, in a way, is the headliner of that group because he is the young guy. I mean, York is still in that category too, obviously, but Zamula is really still and Zamula is still kind of a prospect in that sense because he hasn't cracked that level yet the same way.
We kind of know what Cam York is at this point in time.
We know a lot more about Cam York, but the interesting guy is the 8th guy who's still here because Emil Andre has made it this far. And I don't know if, again, because here's the not the easy thing, but Forster and Brink could very well both play in the first game, or one of them plays and the other doesn't, or something of the sort. It could be any combination of this. There's there is, and there's a way to look at those two and say, okay, maybe Forster gets game 1 and Brink gets game 2, and that's how they're gonna do this for the early portion of this until they see something else shake out, right? At least you would know where those two guys stand. And by the way, you're keeping one of the forwards around to be your extra guy. Well, you don't necessarily need to do that with the defense if you have 8. Like, the 8th guy doesn't necessarily mean it's the guy who falls, that he leapfrogs the guy in 7th when somebody goes down or something happens. So Andre would possibly have some legwork to do if he wanted to get into the lineup. And if that's the case, then just send him down.
Right. Right, exactly. And we've talked about the fact that it may just be better for him to be playing 18 or 19 minutes a night, or 22, 23 minutes a night in the AHL as opposed to 11 or 12 at the NHL level. So there's kind of pros and cons to both sides of that for him as well.
There are. Now, here's the good news. And obviously, take it from somebody who sees the way that John Tortorella talks about certain people, and like in terms of he's got his players he likes and he's got his players that he's not as big of a fan of. And, we mentioned how Wade Allison kind of is like that. Morgan Frost is a little bit like that, in the not the biggest fan of category.
Right.
And then you've got a guy like, you got the guys who are like Noah Cates, like he's talked about Tyson Forster like that a little bit. He's talked about Brink a little bit like that. He's got his other guys too, like Couturier, Atkinson, Tippett, Hathaway, Paling. He's talked about Delorier. He talks about like that. Like he's got his group of guys he likes, and then there's a handful of guys that's like, well, no matter what you do, I'm not really giving you the praise, right?
Fair enough.
He talks about Andre like that, but he talks about Stahl like that, and he talks about Sealer like that, and he talks about Walker like that.
And there's only so many spots. Yeah.
Right. And like at the end of the day, you can potentially fill 4 of these spots relatively easily with Sanheim, Ristolainen, York, and Zamula. If Zamula is going to be, and by the way, Zamula is not waiver exempt, so he would have to pass through waivers.
He would also have to clear. Right.
But I think he's done kind of a little bit of enough to make it, because in the sense that he's bigger, he seems like he's a lot more physical, and I think it's just worth the shot. If he's got to play on a roster or go through waivers, I think you've got to give him the shot. You've got to give him the fair chance to see that he can play at this level, especially with the size he's put on. I think he put on like 20 pounds or something like that. So he's had a really big offseason.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
If you're going to talk about Andre like that, though, too, then you should find a way to play him. And Andre's a tough one for me because I liked what I saw. He made a couple of plays on the and he didn't get a point for it, but he made a couple of plays on the sequence that led to Delorier's goal against the Islanders. And you can see how, it's like you can see the wheels in motion in his head as he's making things happen on the ice. Like he'll make it, he'll get it, he'll almost be able to freeze for a second and make that decision and then execute it. So he's got great poise offensively.
Yeah.
You can see it right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does he need some work defensively? Are there some things that need to be worked out? Sure there are, but he's exactly the type of player that people would watch, learn on the fly, and be fine with.
Absolutely. It's a great player for a rebuild. Yep.
The problem is you've got 3 other guys that you could essentially, I know people want to play the kids. Stahl, Walker, and Sealer all are on 1-year contracts.
Exactly.
And they all have something that they could offer if somebody else wants them later on down the line. So what's the better decision? Like here's and this is the answer to the question, kind of, at least to me. If you're going to put Andre on the roster and therefore give yourself 8 defensemen, what you're really saying is that York, Zamula, and Andre are going to play every night. So are Sanheim and Ristolainen, because they're the 2 best guys beyond that.
Right. And then you have a spot.
And then you have 1 spot left with 3 veterans, and you're going to have to pick one. And if you're not, and the truth of the matter is, if you're not capable of doing that, then send the kid down.
Yes.
Like I think he's done. Like I think he's done close to enough to make it on the team. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's completely NHL ready, but he's done close enough.
And we do want to put the caveat. That the occasional night off type of thing is something that we are okay with. I know we've talked about it on the show before. He doesn't have to play literally 82 games if he's up. But as long as he's playing 70 plus, 75 plus, most of the games, then keep him in the roster. Absolutely.
What you want to see is that he shows that he's worth keeping in the lineup to begin with.
And if he doesn't, he won't play and they'll send him down. Absolutely.
Sure. But that's why I'm saying, and Tortorella talked about this too, because it is the constant battle. You're going to have to, seriously, if you're not sitting there, and I mean this truthfully, if you're not sitting there every week, like Tortorella said, weekly, calling about the Phantoms players, calling about who's down there and going, what are they doing compared to what these guys up here are doing? Is somebody ready for the opportunity? Because they should want to give it. And obviously, the same thing goes with, and I mean, look, this even goes for York and Zamula in the case of Andre. Anybody who gets hurt, it doesn't matter who you are. Anybody who ends up being out with injury, that's the next guy up.
Yep.
I mean, at this point, there's no debate about it. They sent down Addard and Ginning. Addard and Ginning are probably the next 2 guys in line after Andre, and it's but Andre's clearly here for a reason.
Absolutely. He has earned the spot this deep into camp. Absolutely.
And they played him a lot, and unexpectedly he got one more preseason game, and then made plays in the preseason game.
Right.
Like it's not like he's out of place there, and he makes mistakes too. But Tortorella kind of likes the aggressiveness. He likes the guy who's willing to go out there and try to make the play.
Absolutely.
If he tries to make the play and then makes a mistake in the process and then bounces right back from it and by trying to make another play
the next time he does it right.
Right. Then you're happy about that. That's development. That's straight development right there. So those things all matter, and you're hoping that I'd love to see a lineup that starts the year with Forrester, with Brink, Frost, Cates, Tippett, Farabee. There's 6 guys right there. You could, like I said, you can kind of lump Paling into it. You can lump Konechny into it a little bit. Those guys still are age appropriate for this. Then you have defensively, you have York, Zamula, Andre all playing. Half of your D-core in the game is literally prospect-worthy material or young guys or however you want to look at it. But I can understand how the idea that there's no room for Wade Allison on this team because Nick Delorier and Garnet Hathaway, I understand how that rubs people the wrong way. I think people are going to look at Garnet Hathaway later on and see that Garnet Hathaway is not cut from
I think people are going to like Garnet Hathaway
because Garnet Hathaway and Paling kind of falls into this a little bit too. They're not cut from they're cut from the fourth line cloth that is today's game, not the old.
You know who they remind me of?
They have an old school edge, but
who they remind me of a little bit?
Who's that?
Is Scott Lawton. Like the way he kind of has that little bit of edge on his game.
Well, what's funny is that to go along with it is that what most people want to see is that if you had to pull a guy from the fourth line in general, it's probably Delorier, because you do see the energy that Hathaway and Paling bring. Not that Delorier doesn't bring his own energy, but Paling and Hathaway are not liabilities on an offensive side of a game. Like let's be real. Those two guys, even Delorier a little bit when he's playing with better players, at least it's not the same thing as when you were sitting there watching. Think about the guys who played on fourth line over the years that we've watched.
Yep. I was here for the Chris Van de Velde era.
Well, bingo. I'm saying you got a guy like somebody like that.
Yep.
With all due respect, Zach McEwen, who didn't score more than 2 goals in a year usually. It's a big deal when he does score goals. You know what I'm saying? You can look at the end of the year and you can say there's a chance that if Paling gets the ice time that we think he's going to get to an extent, that Paling could have 10 goals at the end of the year, or Hathaway could have 8 to 10 or whatever. You know what I mean? It is a possibility. And there are a lot of people that would say that, listen, you bump Lawton down to that line so you fit the other kid.
Right.
And maybe you
I hate that idea.
Well, sure, and maybe that is something later on for if the line isn't playing well.
I was going to say, and we all know that the starting 12 is not going to be the 12 the entire season.
Yeah, you know how we are going to shift. It has nothing to do with performance either. It just the inevitable is that injuries are going to happen.
Right, injuries, maybe a suspension or two, a trade here and there. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about the trade portion until way later in the year, obviously, but seriously, one of the big question marks coming in, and it's not a knock on what the two players have done or what they've accomplished so far and what they hope to accomplish, but you've got to ask questions about Couturier and Atkinson and their durability, because to this point they haven't played a full game. Well, they haven't played a full game. Yes, they played full games in the preseason, but I'm saying they haven't played a full game against the full lineup,
game with full gas, going full
bore. Right. There's always a little bit of the edges off in the preseason, and I get the sense that if you haven't been on the ice in general, like Couturier and Atkinson were, that sure, you just want to be hit by anybody. You don't even care if it's the ECHL guy who's on a tryout, right? You just want to be hit by anybody.
You don't care if it's Hayden Hodgson,
because you just want to feel something and know that it doesn't hurt you too much. And that is one thing that Couturier said, by the way. Couturier's taken some contact and he's been in situations and he comes away and he goes, you know what?
He knows how important that is.
But he comes away and he goes, you know what? No, didn't score in the preseason. Even the offensive production was a little hard to come by in the early going before he had a couple of assists on the board. But physically, he feels good. And he's going into a season where we don't have to question that. We don't have a question. Going in, we don't have any questions about whether he can play.
Right.
And look, it couldn't be said that way at the beginning. We had to go and find out what the deal was.
I feel way better about Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson than I did 2 weeks ago. Way
and you should a little
better.
bit.
Way better.
Yeah, and you should.
Yep.
But everybody else is going to have their role, and you're trying to make sure you give everybody the opportunity to play the minutes that they deserve and that help their development. I don't have a problem with the way that they necessarily constructed the roster. I do hope that, I hope that they get the chance to play Forrester and Brink with some regularity. And if they don't, that they recognize early enough that there's not really a spot for the guy and they just get him down to the minors if that's the case. But
if I told you 4 weeks ago that Brink, Forrester, and Andre would all still be with this roster today, would you have believed me? All 3 of them?
Probably not Brink. And that's not a knock on Brink. It was just I wasn't sure what to expect with him. Forrester, I felt like needed to fall flat on his face. Andre, I kind of knew was going to be an intriguing one because he was coming from a league that you knew gave him a good skill set.
That's fair. But, okay.
It was just going to be how it translated. So I'm surprised he played as much as he did. He's still a question mark, though.
That's fair. But, okay, speaking of leagues with superior skill sets, let's talk about the NHL as a whole.
Sure.
We got a little bit of a season preview here. We're going to hit, I think we go division by division. Pick your playoff teams, and then we'll pick a cup winner. And then we'll get out of here. Sure. Let's start out west in the Pacific Division. So last year, your playoff teams were Vegas, Edmonton, the Los Angeles Kings, and the Seattle Kraken. Beyond that in the division, obviously we have Calgary looking for a bit of a rebound season. Same with Vancouver, and then down at the bottom, San Jose and Anaheim probably going to be down at the bottom again. Who do you think is making the playoffs out there?
I'm going to spare some of the drama here. I think it's the same 4 teams.
You think it's the same 4? You don't think Calgary comes back? You don't think Vancouver makes a run?
I don't think Vancouver makes a run. I think Calgary closes. It was a 7-point gap between Seattle and Calgary. I think that's a much closer gap this year.
Okay.
But I still think Seattle is going to see because Seattle just plays a tough game. I don't think that I don't feel like Seattle, you know how from year 1 to year 2, we looked at Seattle and we were like, this team's gotten significantly better from year 1 to year 2 with what they added.
Okay.
I don't have the same feeling of 2 to 3, and that's not a negative. It's just, it's hard to go from where they were the first year to.
It's hard to take steps that large every year.
But I don't think they got worse, and I think that their style helps them.
Okay.
Calgary's got a lot of question marks. I mean, Calgary think about all the positions where Calgary needs a bounce back. You need a bounce back from the guys that they got from Florida. You need a bounce back from Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. You need a bounce back from your goaltender. You need a major bounce back from Jacob Markstrom.
Yep.
Major.
Major.
You know, as much as, by the way, as much as I love the video of his mask being designed, which, by the way, also goes in the same vein as Carter Hart's mask.
Mask design videos are so dope.
Yeah, but he went all out with the Ring of Fire thing, which by the way, is what they play when they win a game in Calgary. So it's a direct tie-in. The thing looked great. Yeah. It looked phenomenal. And Carter Hart did something very similar with the Johnny Cash vibes. If you're not familiar, if you didn't see, shout out to Paint Zoo on Instagram. Who is an incredible mask artist there.
Okay. So I will say that the same 4 teams make it in the Pacific, but then I will also put the Vancouver Canucks in.
Really?
I'm seeing a bounce back, right? Pettersson started out really slow last year. Besser started out slow last year. Organizationally, they were a bit of a mess. That's kind of gotten a touch better. I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's going to be a wild card spot available. Spoiler alert to the Central Division. I don't think more than 3 teams there are making it.
Interesting.
So I think there will be a spot available out west, and I do think it's there for Vancouver to go grab. I don't know for sure if they're going to be able to do it, but I there's my call. There you go. Got to make a prediction somewhere. So. All right, moving to the Central. Last year's playoff teams were Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. I'll go ahead and skip the drama here because I only have 3 spots available, and I will say that it is Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota.
Okay.
I don't see Winnipeg. Winnipeg's a disaster waiting to happen. Yeah. And then the rest of the division, you have Nashville, St. Louis, Arizona, and Chicago. Arizona's finally started signing human beings to play for their team, so they might make it a little more interesting. And Chicago, again, we expect to kind of sit at the bottom of that division again. But
Yeah, I mean, so I'll spare the
but
drama.
But they're going to be better.
Right. I'll spare the drama on this and say I have the same top 3 that you do.
Okay.
I don't know if that this was a tight division last year for those 3 teams, so I don't know if it's going to be the same order. That might be
that's fair. Yeah,
no, that might be a hint to something that I say later on, just to point out. I don't love Winnipeg this year. I think they probably took a step back.
Yep.
St. Louis makes me curious.
Okay.
I don't like they're this type of team that they could be really good or really bad. They're in a unique situation. Nashville kind of has some of that vibe too. Let's put it this way. Here's the easiest way for me to describe this 4th pick for you. I'll give an edge to Nashville here on the final playoff spot, but I think this is going to be
kind of as the breaking point,
right? And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you that Nashville, St. Louis, I'll throw Calgary into the mix at this point for this also. Well, even Seattle too. I'll throw Seattle into it from the other division as well. And I'll even give a nod to Arizona, who I think is going to be a little bit better than people think. I think you're looking at a team who makes the last playoff spot in the West last year was Winnipeg at 95. I think that the last playoff spot this year could very easily be 90, 92 points.
I agree. And that's kind of why I went 5 teams in the Pacific, because there's just not as many free points in the Central. Arizona, like I said, signed human beings, got way better. The Chicago Blackhawks acquired Connor Bedard in the draft, Taylor Hall via trade, got dramatically better. I'm not saying they're going to be good, but they're going to have more than 59 points this year.
No, and I kind of, because obviously I left them out of including them in any of these other teams. Arizona is still going to be better than Chicago this year.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think Arizona will be in the playoff race far longer than any of us think they will be.
And I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm not taking anything away from Bedard, who I still think will win the Calder and all that type of stuff. But I'm going to tell you, Logan Cooley's going to bring an impact to that team in Arizona that is going to be impressive. And it's going to make people pay a lot more attention to the Arizona Coyotes than you did last year. You know,
I'll get into my Calder vote next. Don't worry.
Oh, you got something up your sleeve, don't you?
Don't you worry. But okay.
Oh, I hope you go a direction that I think you might be going with this, because if it's really out of left field, I'm going to be very happy.
It's picante. Don't worry. Okay. So you have Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, and then you said
I said Nashville
is your 4th spot?
Yes, and mostly because of goaltending, but again, to me, that's going to be the 92 point mark is probably the highest, and I would put all of those other. Actually, believe it or not, I think Winnipeg actually slips even a little further here.
Okay.
I think St. Louis and Calgary have a better shot of stealing that final wild card spot than Winnipeg does, and I think Arizona hangs around longer than people think. Also, that's probably it. Vancouver probably hangs around for a decent amount of time too. It's really the bottom teams are still the bottom teams.
The West is pretty interesting. You have Colorado, you have Vegas and Edmonton.
Yeah, and are based.
Right, and then Dallas is pretty close to kind of that powerhouse status too. At this point.
I think they're almost there at this.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're even there potentially.
Jake Ottinger, Miro Heiskanen, and Jason Robertson. They're loaded
and continuing to get and go in that direction.
Continuing to get more loaded, right?
Yes.
But other than that, it's wide open. You have your 4 powerhouse teams at the top, and then 5 through 12 or 13 in the conference
because in fairness,
have a chance.
I say because in fairness, I don't know what kind of team Minnesota's going to be. And by the way, Minnesota just lost Jared Spurgeon for week to week. You know,
how many teams out west can you genuinely say with 100% fact that they're not going to make the playoffs? Chicago?
I'd say Anaheim. Chicago, Arizona, Anaheim, San Jose. I think Vancouver's still a certainty there. I know you like them a little bit more there, but
so I don't think Arizona is making the playoffs, but I don't think it's as much of a certainty as you do.
I still think it's a certainty just because I still think there's enough teams above them. That's the only reason I'll call it that. But I think they hang around. Oh, I think
don't be surprised if they're within 4 or 5 points come early February. They're going to be right in the range. Yeah.
No, that still wouldn't surprise me. I would. You know what I'm going to be curious about? If they're still within that range, then, which is still very possible, there's still a month until the trade deadline at that point.
Do they add?
Well, not do they add. I wonder if they start to fall out of it then and then sell because they know they can get assets.
The old Nashville Predators.
No, well, and then the last month and change of that year is brutal.
Yeah,
because there's no way around it.
cut all the dead weight.
Well, because here's the thing. By the way, and this is something we didn't mention because I brought in the Logan Cooley effect for Arizona. Here's something that I'll mention because I think that they've got a really talented goaltender who has the potential to steal you some games. Vejmelka's got the chance to steal some games that they shouldn't have.
I agree. Between him and Cooley, they're gonna.
And I mean, they got young guys well beyond Cooley, obviously. I'm not saying that, but when Cooley decided that he was going to join instead of maybe another college year,
right?
Geez, like
that to me came out looking as spectacular as he did.
Sure,
he looks good. But okay. Let's move over to the East here. The teams in the Atlantic last year. We had the Boston Bruins, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa, Florida. That's your playoff cutoff, and then you have the Buffalo Sabres, the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Montreal Canadiens. So we can kind of forget about the Montreal Canadiens because they're cut off the bottom and gone. But 1 through 7. I think we got a battle here. I don't know how many spots come out of this.
Did we say? I want to go back to the West for 1 second with a question.
Yeah.
And, well, just because did we say we were going to give division winners at all, or were we passing that up?
We can if you want.
No. The reason I'm saying is because it's been pretty easy to identify who the division winner is going to be out of this Atlantic division for a long time.
Yeah.
For the past 5 years, you can probably easily pinpoint who you thought it was going to be or close to.
Probably closer to 10 years, just on a year-to-year basis. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. This might be the biggest wild card that they've had in a long time.
Yeah, but I don't think it is. I think with the Vasilevsky injury, I think answers the question.
Oh well, to me it didn't. I still had my answer was going to be the same even without the injury, but I
think the Toronto Maple Leafs win the division.
So do I. I think that's where I was going with that.
Well, you're right. I think that they were probably going to win the division regardless. I think the Vasilevsky injury removes the question.
It does a little bit. I mean, here's the thing with this division, because I'm having a tough time with this one. Because
how many teams? Because we talked about.
I still want to say 4.
Right. So we talked about the West being 4 power heavy teams, and then it's kind of wide open. The East is kind of the opposite, where it's just 12 teams that are crazy fighting for 8 spots.
So this is going to get really interesting because here's the thing.
Yep.
I'm right there with you. I agree. I think Toronto wins the division because to me, I think Toronto's got the best total package right now as we speak today. Boston's got to figure out what everything looks like without Bergeron and Krejci. Yeah. And it's going to be a potential adjustment.
I'm going to fall into the same trap I fell into last year and tell you that Boston doesn't make the playoffs.
I'm not going there. I honestly think they still finish 3rd in division.
Okay.
I'm willing to give them top 3 material, but I don't think.
I think there's been too much advancement in the bottom half of that division.
I would love to agree, but I felt that way last year and nothing changed.
Yeah, but it did though. Because Buffalo missed the playoffs by 1 point.
True.
Right. And Ottawa was in the race until early March. And, things have changed. It's no longer the Bruins, Leafs, and Lightning dominating the top and just beating up on the 5 punching bags at the bottom of the division. It is a much tighter division than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. Who are your playoff teams? Well, you have Toronto, you have Boston.
Yeah, so I still think Toronto, Boston, and Tampa all make
are locks. Okay.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. I'm not going to act like I'm surprised if one of those 2 specifically, because I feel supremely confident that Toronto is in this thing. There's every reason to believe that.
Put the among Boston
but among Boston and Tampa, I would probably I wouldn't be surprised if it went so far south with either of them, given whatever the situation. Like in Boston's case, it's you lost 2 locker room leaders and on ice leaders, and what kind of effect does that have? They still have a lot of talent. I still think that they've got good goaltending, and I think that they've got a foundation that can get them there. I don't think it's going to look pretty, obviously. It's not going to be the shiny NHL record-winning season that they had in the regular season this time around. It's going to be far from that. I mean, to me, seriously, you're talking about a team that had 135 points in the regular season last year.
I don't think they're making it.
I think you shave off 35 points.
I think minimum. You shave off 45, maybe 50.
I still think they're going to be in the mid. Though I think mid 90s. Anything beyond mid 90s is a stretch. But
I understand. But your top line center is Charlie Coyle. Like, come on, man.
I'm curious. I don't know if that's going to hold for the whole year. If it's Zacha, then I think you've got a little bit more there.
You know what I'm saying, though. It still gets pretty thin pretty quick.
Oh, I know. But you know what? Also, there's an inevitable trade that's probably waiting to happen or something like.
Have you mentioned your fourth team yet?
No, I have not yet to this point.
Okay.
Because to me, it's because Florida is going to have a very big period with what they put everybody through and the whole the trying to get the Stanley Cup and all of that. It took a lot out of that team. They lost pieces along the way too. This is going to be a very interesting year for them, and I'm not 1,000% convinced that they make the playoffs.
I'm not either.
Like, to me, I still think Detroit's probably below both Florida and Buffalo.
I agree.
Ottawa's a little bit more of a wild card there, but I think maybe this is the year. This might be the year the drought is over, and I think this is the year Buffalo maybe jumps past Florida in this case and makes the playoffs. That's what I'm thinking.
I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to make the playoffs. I think that the Buffalo Sabres are going to make the playoffs. I think they will be in a divisional spot.
Whoa, you're going top 3.
And I see a universe.
Oh, boy.
Where they finish ahead of Tampa for the 2-3.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's going to happen. But if Vasilevsky is out for 2 months and then takes another 3 weeks to ramp up, I think there's a chance that Buffalo accrues enough points that they can get themselves in a position to take second place there. And then I believe that's it for that division.
You're going 3-3 only, so
I am
leaving.
Cutting out the Boston Bruins. I am cutting out the Florida Panthers, and the Ottawa Senators. I believe are going to be in the discussion, but I am leaving them out of the playoffs as well. Yep.
Okay. Here's the thing. I will give you this with Buffalo because I do agree on a lot of this. I think that Buffalo there's an element for Buffalo where something eventually has to give. You've got on the back end, you've got Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power. Mm-hmm. On the front, you've got Tage Thompson is the leader of this, obviously, but you've got a whole bunch of players. Well, Tuck is there, but you should have a bunch of young guys who are just ready to make noise. Not to mention the fact that I don't believe I've seen anything of the sort just yet. So Zach Benson might make the team out of camp. Mm-hmm. He's that good.
Matthew Savoy too.
You got to push for this at this point. Like you've built this for years and years and years, and you've got a bunch. And oh, by the way,
you've got $8 million in cap space.
Yeah, that's true too. And oh, by the way, in goal.
You have by the way, the 2024 Calder Trophy winner.
You're going there, aren't you?
Devin Levi.
My fantasy team thanks you already.
He got sniped for me, otherwise I would have. But
it was sitting there for a little while, and I said, you know what? Yeah. This kid's good, and he's got a real shot.
He got snagged. He got sniped from me in the third round.
What?
Keeper league, baby.
Oh, keeper league. That's
keeper true. League, okay. Baby.
So sorry. Okay, well, in a year where we redraft every year,
I
believe 8th round.
Still pretty high.
It is. Well, yeah, but I'm saying after the run of goalies, where everybody takes guys like, all the traditional guys, and I'm sitting here trying to play, look into the crystal ball, and go guess what happens at the end of the year. Where this guy, I don't think he wins the Calder, but I think he's a finalist.
I think there's a real chance he wins 40 games this year.
I mean, that would be remarkable if that's the case, but
I think he's going to play a ton.
I do think he's going to play a ton. I feel like he's the starting goaltender.
Yes. I think he's going to win a ton.
I think he's going to be good. I don't know if I would go 40, but I do think he's going to win a lot of games. Yes.
Okay. All right. So those are our predictions for the Atlantic. You have 4 teams: Boston, Toronto, Tampa, and
I threw Buffalo in.
Right.
So the only thing I did differently than you is I kept Boston in the picture.
All right. So that means you have 4 teams in the Metro as well. Who are they?
I do.
Because last year's teams, by the way, just keeping up that theme here, is Carolina, New Jersey, New York, and New York.
Right.
With Pittsburgh, Washington, the Flyers, and Columbus missing. Again, the Flyers and Columbus, we pretty much expected them to miss as well again this year. So
we do. I'm keeping 3 out of the 4 playoff teams from last year in the picture, which is Carolina, New Jersey, and the New York Rangers. I am subbing out the New York Islanders with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Okay. I agree. I think they're both going to make it, though. I think
you have the Islanders making it too.
Yeah, I think Horvat and Barzal is enough to get them in. I think, yeah, they're a good team. It's hard to bet against Lou Lamoriello just finding a way to get into the playoffs.
See, I don't love them. I just don't love them. I don't.
But they are your typical. They are your typical.
Oh, they are, and
that team is the perfect example when someone mentions the sum being more than the parts.
Well, by the way, so okay, listen, you just brought up with Florida and Buffalo. By the way, the Buffalo missed the playoffs by a grand total of 1 point. The Islanders were only in the playoffs by virtue of 2 points then, both on Buffalo and Pittsburgh last year. I don't think the Islanders improved near as much as Pittsburgh did, and I think that's strictly the Eric. Like, if you tell me the Erik Karlsson effect is not worth 2 more points in the standings, I think
no. I agree.
Like, I just don't see the rise from I don't see the rise from the Islanders, even keeping Horvat.
I don't necessarily see the rise either. I really do think it is a matter of I think the Islanders are still a better team than the Bruins, then the Panthers, then the Senators.
Well, that's fair. See, you're taking the chance on the Islanders making it over maybe even a team in the Atlantic.
I'm looking at them squeaking into that second wild card. I have 5 teams.
Okay, so you are putting them as the last one in, though. And so,
probably, yeah. Like
you have Pittsburgh above them?
We're not necessarily delineating that tightly, but yeah, I would probably be the least confident in them. And I would probably put them
you
on
have
the
Pittsburgh ahead of the Islanders, though, yeah.
Almost definitely. Okay. I don't think Sidney Crosby, if he's fighting Peyton Krebs in the preseason, don't think he is allowing them to miss the playoffs this year.
I just think that now that you don't take, first of all, you make all those changes in the offseason anyway, and I'm not talking about on the ice, I'm talking front office wise. I mean, you go out and you get the general manager that everybody seems to want or would have wanted. Right?
He was the stud free agent general manager on the scene.
Exactly. And then, oh, by the way, one of his first orders of business is look at the trade that I can swing. Hey, let's just bring in the reigning Norris Trophy winner. Right. To join a blue line that has Chris Letang on it already. And by the way, the power play unit that he's going to be on is going to have Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, maybe Letang's with them. If not, it's probably Brian Rust. Who cares? Stupid. It doesn't matter. The 5th guy doesn't even make a difference. The 4 others are going to do all the work.
Stupid. It's going to be wild,
Exactly. I'm also, this is also me saying that with Erik Karlsson in fantasy as well.
Sure, and the Penguins do have some concerns. Obviously, if any of their big guys go down, they've all had injury pasts. Mm-hmm. They are an older team. That is one of the risks there. They do have some questions in net. They're definitely not the most complete team that we're talking about here on the list. But I think they are still good enough to get towards.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I'm sure this is probably the same for you, but to me, it doesn't matter anyway, because in the big picture, the team that we're talking about making the last playoff spot in the East is not a big deal.
No, and frankly, the East is going to be so good that whoever sneaks in 7-8, probably not expecting them to do much. But then again, we said the same thing about the Florida Panthers this year. So
that's true. That is very true.
That is the great thing about hockey and the NHL in general, is that it's just such a random sport. These teams are close enough.
So here's the thing. I know, we gave a division winner for the Atlantic. I don't necessarily need to give division winners for the Western Conference, but I am curious. Who's your division winner in the Metro? So same here. Okay.
And so unless one of the teams out west just runs roughshod, I think the Devils are a real contender to win the President's Trophy.
That's an interesting choice. I don't disagree with you. I think that's a very, very good team over there.
And if you're going to sit here and ask me who's winning the Stanley Cup in 2024,
go ahead.
I put the Devils there. I don't know if they win it, but I put them in the series. I would probably pick them to come out of the West or out of the East at this point.
Okay. Who are you putting in? Who are you pulling out of the West to play them? If that's the case.
I want to say the Oilers so bad.
Yeah.
Because every year, the correct answer is Connor McDavid should be there.
Okay.
It's hard to bet against Colorado. Here we go. Okay.
Just do it. Just go for it.
The New Jersey Devils.
Yes.
Versus.
Yes.
The Dallas Stars. Dallas Stars. Yep. Jake Ottinger, baby. Mero Heiskanen.
I'm not saying, oh, come on, because I disagree. I'm saying, oh, come on, because that's exactly the Stanley Cup final.
Really?
It's exactly the two teams I think. I think you're getting 2000 rematch.
We've been co-hosting too long together. It's been, what, 4 years?
Yeah. Now, I got to be careful about how I kind of describe the rest of this here because, here's the thing. I'm not trying to detail the whole playoff picture here, but, the most important series in the Eastern Conference to me in the playoff race that leads up to the Stanley Cup final is going to be probably the inevitable Carolina-New Jersey series that comes in round 2. Because, I want to say that's your conference final, but it's not. We know this. Thanks, Gary.
We will all complain about the 1-8 system when we see the matchups.
Thanks, Gary.
Absolutely.
Anyway, but that's probably, to me, that's the match right there because there's an element where I agree with you that because here's the thing. You put Edmonton possibly on the other side for a second, right?
Them in Vegas is kind of the same matchup. It's going to happen in the second round, and it's going to feel like the conference final.
Them in Vegas, it does feel like that. But what I was going to sit there and say is that I see a world where Carolina and Edmonton meet in the Cup final too.
Absolutely,
I see that world existing. I see that final.
Any of the 4 powerhouse teams out west could easily find their way there. Just for the record,
I mean, Vegas. Yeah, Vegas. You're right. I think that's the battle right there. I mean,
is anybody surprised if Vegas, Edmonton, Colorado, or Dallas is sitting there? Nobody.
I think that it almost. You know what? That's the thing that made last year so much fun. By the way, was watching as sure, Vegas and Edmonton made it to the second round, then Vegas moved on. Colorado was out in the first round though, and
I expect them to come back angry.
Dallas won a series, and then you know what I'm saying? It was just this.
Yeah.
You just had this dogfight, and
the playoffs were incredible last year.
Dallas was very close last year, though. You got to admit that much.
That's why I have them there this year.
Yeah, that. You got to remember that was the conference final last year. Was Dallas Vegas? It's there. They're right there. Yep. And I think that they've got the. I've talked for years about how much I like the core that Dallas has built, and I think that they are hungry for the next step. Some of them because of what they tasted in the bubble in 2020, but also some of which got the taste last year too. Their arc is very
motivated.
Their arc is very close. I mean, not in terms of being in existence, obviously, but their arc is very close to Vegas's.
Yeah,
make a final, get bumped in the first round when you thought you deserved better.
Ride a goalie.
Get to a conference final and be right there too. Eventually, you're gonna probably win.
And maybe this is their year. And you know what the exciting part is, Kevin? The NHL season begins this week.
Tuesday
the NHL season, as we record right now, the NHL season begins in less than 48 hours.
Yes. So, all right. So I want to do one more season preview exercise before we get out of here because obviously we just did the season preview portion for the league. Yeah. And we talked about playoffs and all that stuff like that. Obviously, neither of us included the Flyers in our playoff pictures because we know better. But this is the interesting question. So where do they finish in the standings? Collectively,
ideally as low as possible.
I hear you.
So looking at the league standings here, I'm just going to kind of talk about these teams at the bottom of the list. The teams that finished below them last year.
Sure.
We've talked about the fact that Arizona is probably going to pass them and probably finish above them in the standings this year. We imagine.
I see that. Yep.
Montreal is the Flyers are probably going to finish right around wherever Montreal finishes.
I agree with that.
I think that is the team that you're looking at this year as the track. That is the pace. Because to me, San Jose, Chicago, and Anaheim are definitely still way behind. And I think Columbus is even probably still the next tier. I think they're going to be a step above those super basement teams. But I do think Columbus will take a little bit of a step forward. So I'm looking at the Flyers picking around 5 or 6 in next year's draft because that's what we're talking about, right? Come on.
Okay, well, so here's the best way I look at it because I know that people have this debate about how they're going to win too many games, this, that, the other thing, right? I start by asking, where do they finish in the division? Because that's the first place you start. Can you take the other 7 teams that they play with regularity and say they're better than any of them?
Columbus.
And I think Columbus maybe is a touch better than they are. And the only reason I say is because I think Columbus very much committed to what was going on the second that Zach Werenski was out for the year.
Absolutely.
And then the rest of the injuries followed. You now get Werenski back with Ivan Provorov on the team now, by the way.
Yep.
On top of the fact that you got better at forward, just with another year of development for everybody else. And by the way, you're just going to magically go into the draft and pick up and drop Adam Fantilli into the mix too, which... Yep. By the way, again, another, come on in fantasy here for me.
And it seems like the team has bonded dramatically after the whole Mike Babcock thing.
Sure.
So you might just get a team with a chip on their shoulders that wins 16 of their first 20.
And I didn't take a leap and go, they're going to make the playoffs or anything like that. But I do think that's a 16-point gap in the standings from last year, with the Flyers above them.
That's why I hesitated on the jump. I think it's going to be close.
But I don't think it was near as far as what that gap really was.
That's fair.
And
especially the post-trade deadline Philadelphia Flyers, which is basically the roster that's coming back.
Right. So that's the first part. So I don't think there's anybody. I think they finished last in the division. I don't think there's anybody that's worse than they are.
It's them or Columbus. I could see it going either way, but fair enough.
Right. Then I go to the Atlantic and I say every team in the Atlantic's better except for Montreal.
Yeah.
I don't
hard to argue against that.
I don't even Detroit. Detroit just got Alex DeBrincat. You think that doesn't a couple more wins?
I know.
In some capacity. So okay, there you go. I look at the Western Conference and I start in the Central and I go again, every single team. I think that Winnipeg and St. Louis are somewhere in the middle with Nashville, but somewhere in the middle, and they're going to have
good enough teams that they're going to dumpster the Flyers.
They're going to have interesting years, but they're going to be in the 80-point mark. And you have to be mid-80s.
They're good enough teams that they're taking 3 out of 4 points from you when you play your 2 games.
I think Arizona may be better.
I agree.
I think they may. I don't doubt that Chicago's jump is not going to be 16 points here. I do think the Bedard effect makes it closer.
That's fair. Especially if him and Hall find any sort of chemistry.
Sure. And then obviously you go to the Pacific.
San Jose and Anaheim are pretty atrocious.
You go to the Pacific and you can wipe out the top 4 teams that got 100 points last year.
Sure.
And even if they got a little bit worse, it doesn't matter. Calgary should be better. I think Vancouver's better. And then San Jose, Anaheim. See, here's the one thing I will say. I don't think Anaheim's the worst team in the league next year.
I agree.
This season.
I think it's San Jose.
I think Anaheim jumps San Jose. I think Anaheim may even have a chance to jump Montreal in this case.
I don't disagree. So you're putting the Flyers. You're putting the Flyers kind of somewhere in the 3-4 range.
I think they'll finish 4th.
Okay. I kind of have them in the 5-6 range. So we're not terribly
I come away from this thinking, well, fourth is a little extreme. Here's what I'll say: Anaheim, San Jose, Chicago, and Montreal. They're the only 4 teams I think that come that are close,
clearly worse.
Right, that are worse. So I think that they fall right. Maybe actually, what I'm saying is I think they'll finish 5th.
Okay.
And then you cross your fingers and hope that the lottery balls go your way.
Yep. Well, and the great news is there's nothing left to do now but wait and see. The season kicks off Tuesday night. The Flyers start Thursday night. Yep. We'll be back next Sunday to talk about all of it. In the meantime, find us everywhere you find your podcast. We're at YWT Podcast, everywhere, including sportstalkphilly.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the like button over there. It really helps us out. And Kevin, it's time for hockey, man. It's time for the season. Let's go.
It's
all right.
Great.
We will be back next week. Until then, we will see Philadelphia Flyers hockey, and we'll see you